Last time I was here, last year presenting, I think the newspaper quoted me as saying that we were in pretty good shape at the county. And you may be wondering after reading some of the recent articles, what the heck was he talking about last year? Because there's some things that have changed since then. And I'm going to start this off by saying I think we're still in pretty good shape. And you may find that to be an awkward statement given what the media has reported. And I don't think they've been inaccurate. They've been accurate. But I'm going to kind of explain myself and hope that you'll follow along with me here. People have said, you know, the county has a spending problem, the county isn't managed well, the county, you know, all these things that you hear out there in the community. The truth is we lost a whole lot of revenue, you guys. I mean, more revenue than, you know, anybody would likely be able to survive through when you look at our business. And as I said, I'm going to treat each fund as a business, and I'm going to tell you, speak mostly to the general fund because that's where the problem is in the county. I'm going to leave the dedicated funds mostly aside. But if you look at this, essentially, this is what we lost in O&C payments from when I came in 06, 07 as county administrator. We were receiving $15.6 million to our general fund, $3.4 million to Title II and Title III. Title II and Title III essentially is services that are delivered on federal lands, and Title III is really the part that came to the county's budget. What that did for us is it provided an offset to the general fund to provide search and rescue services, firefighting on those for our work crews. And so when that goes away, the general fund has to pay for it. And I can tell you when it comes to search and rescue, we have a very excellent program, probably the best program in the state. And I am not kidding when I say this. If I was lost or anyone I cared about was lost, it didn't matter where in the state, I'd want to call our sheriff's department to come and find us. We've been fortunate to be able to do that because of Title III. It's going to get really tight now, especially given we have 2,800 square miles and lots of recreation. It'll be really tight for the sheriff's department to be able to do those types of activities because now they have to be funded out of the general fund. And I said I was going to stay mostly away from dedicated funds, but I also want to note that we did lose $4 million to our road fund here as well. That was a 26% reduction in discretionary spending all at once in our general fund and a 36% reduction in dedicated funding in spending for the road fund. So, you know, nearly a third of our income on average. In addition to that, we have seen, as everyone has, reductions in our interest earnings. Our portfolio was about $170 million that we invest at any given time. And I invest that through my staff with a policy that the Board of Commissioners adopts annually, down $20 million, so we have less money to invest. Our rate dropped significantly from the peak. We were earning about 5.2, now we're down to 1.4. It's been as low as 1.2. And if you look at that, that's $6.74 million. Now remember, I just showed you $23 million in revenue we lost, which was mostly discretionary. Now I'm showing you another $6.74 million that we've lost. Half of that is discretionary, about $3.37 million. Discretionary means we get to decide what we do with it. Dedicated means it's already decided where it goes. The other reduction that we saw was in our property tax base, and if you're in real estate or development or anything to do with property, you understand this as well. But you know, at the peak, which was about 5.6, we were seeing growth about 5.3%. Measure 50 limits it to 3%. The reason why we have the additional percentage is because of all new construction coming on. So that's down 5.3%. Our tax base, and this is kind of interesting, our budget is $300+ million. Our property tax base is $31 million. So if you look at a $300 million budget, $31 million is where we have discretion. Everything else is pretty much dedicated. It's dedicated in some of those businesses or funds I told you about, or it's dedicated for debt service. So we lost another $1.68 million there. We had some other changes. I'm going to run through these real quick. State law requires the state DOR to collect delinquent taxes and interest on those and distribute them to the CAFA grant to counties. It's County Assessment Function Funding Assistance Grant. That helps pay for assessment for all of our taxing districts. And the county collects taxes for ourselves, but we collect it for every other district out there as well. So the general fund had to back that up, almost $700,000 a year. Our Justice Court program, which funds 8 people on our traffic team, the state legislature changed laws there, and we lost about $700,000 there that the general fund had to back up. And you know, because of the economic slowdown, the clerk wasn't obviously recording as many loan documents and those kinds of things. $750,000 there, and community development, the general fund subsidizes that so that we don't have to raise fees for people that are doing construction to the tune of about $800,000. So when you add all of this up, we lost $27.7 million, and I'm excluding that $4 million in road fund. $27 million a year that 5 years ago someone in my job would have had to deliver all of these services. This year we also got a huge increase in PERS, and I've said this multiple times on record, I'm not afraid to say it, PERS is a disaster. It needs to be reformed. The reforms that we're seeing are helpful but not at all adequate. It is devastating to local government budgets, and especially our budget. In this case, we took an additional $1.8 million over the base cost of PERS this year that added to this deficit. So this all happened over 5 years. If you inflate that, and you can go home and put this in the inflationary calculator, that $27 million just from 05-06 to now, it's about $30 million in revenue we lost. As I said, our property tax base is $31.68 million. We lost almost half of our funding for services that we have to deliver, and a huge amount. Now, I said last year that I thought we were in pretty good shape, and I started this meeting by saying I still think we're in pretty good shape. If you look, this budget that I recommended, we still are holding about $26 million in reserves in our general fund. People saying, you've got $26 million, why are you making these cuts? We're making these cuts because the budget committee determined after my budget that they kind of wanted to draw a line in the sand. They wanted to begin to set an expectation that we're spending through reserves, and they wanted to be proactive. They didn't want to wait till we were essentially out of all of this money before they decided to bring options to the citizens about what services they want and how we'll pay for them. I want to talk a little bit about, I had this graph up here last year. This is the cuts that we've made in the county at least since I've been here in 06. We had almost 1,075 actual employees, and we're down to 836 in this budget. After I made my proposed budget and made these 44 cuts and submitted a balanced budget using about $7 million in reserves, and the budget committee said, we're drawing a line, we want to cut this back further. They cut another $1.4 million. This is what you started reading about in the paper. So they cut a contract with our chamber president, Mr. Nance, $60,000. I'm glad he laughed about that because that's a tough deal. We had a wildlife services agent that did a lot of work in the community, out in the rural communities. Rogue Valley Television, the meetings that you all see and probably hopefully flip through very quickly unless you're really, really bored and it's 2 in the morning and it's a replay. Our OSU extension, a lot of outcry over that one. RV COG, our library took another $250,000 cuts. It's going to result in a 4-week furlough, 2 weeks and 2 weeks of our library system this year. Our code compliance in our community development department, $100,000. Human service agencies, these are all the mostly nonprofit service partners that help deliver services as a base of support for our county programs. Public health, which I said was immunizations, veteran services. And the sheriff's office took an additional $250,000 cut. That was after those reductions that I already said. So as I said, about $1.4 million in additional cuts. Kind of explained why the board and budget committee did this. Based on the budget that I submitted, we had about a $6.7 million operating deficit. Now, we're not like the federal government. We don't just get to spend trillions we don't have. This was an operating deficit. We had the money in savings account, and we used the money from savings account to pay for it. So we have the money, and we were paying for it. And after the board and budget committee did their work to cut my budget back, proposed budget back further, we're operating at a $5.3 million deficit. When the board and budget committee adopted the budget, all of those things that I just showed you that they cut, most of those things, they reauthorized for 6 months of funding based on a PERS reform bill, the governor's side, Senate Bill 822, that collared rates and returned about $450,000 to us in PERS payments. We are hoping for a lot more. Hopefully our legislature will keep at it. But that allowed us in the short term to return some of those services.